Even from the get-go, when you make a character in Theros, they have something different about them. You're not just a villager who happened to take up a sword necessarily. You may actually have come from someone's mind or from someone's forge. You know, you have that kind of level of destiny from the get.
Yeah, you could be a Nyxborn or you could be an Anvilrot. You could have these things where you are actually brought into being by the god as a sort of as a as a like a not necessarily a servant, but as a potential champion of that god. Um, and so it's something that a DM could work with their player on like a session zero. So when you are rolling up your character, how much of that story do you want to weave in? You could just say, like regular D&D, I roll up a character and now I'm in Theros and I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to go on an adventure. Um, but you could really get into it if a DM, was really into the lore of Theros and says, all right, your character already has a destiny set down for them. And destinies are kind of cool because um, there is fate and there's destiny in Theros. And fate is this sense that if you do nothing, if you're just a regular person on Theros, you will live your life and the fates will weave it and it will be determined by what the fates weave. If you are a hero, you all of a sudden now have a chance to change your fate. And now you have access to your destiny. Now, it doesn't guarantee that your destiny is going to be something that you can achieve, but you at least have a shot at it. And so now, being a hero, the fates kind of see the thread start to weave itself. And then the fates kind of think to themselves, oh, we got a hero in the weave here, and this is going to be interesting. And that heroic sort of impulse then drives you out of the weft of fate, and now you can try and achieve your destiny. So the DM can kind of work with the player and say, well, here's like one of your destinies. If you can achieve this, you will have appeased your god that you want to worship. Or maybe you are going to free yourself of the gods and sort of be sort of a rebel. Maybe you roll up a Leonin, which are sort of these iconoclasts and these atheistic these creatures, these lion people, and you can kind of forge your own path and achieve your own destiny outside of this whole scheme. So there's a lot of fun stuff, a lot of fun story material.
Beyond the Leonin, which are just basically lion men and women, we've got uh, which do have much beef with the gods. We've also got satyrs.
So satyrs are fun. I actually had the fun privilege of doing the satyr playable race section. And the thing I love about the satyrs is that if satyrs are seen by most people on Theros as just being sort of mischievous goofballs. They are troublemakers. They are these forces of chaos. They kind of lure in humans to their crazy lifestyle, and they're kind of like the wild artists of Greenwich Village. Like if your kid went and said, "Well, I'm going to go to Greenwich Village," as a parent, you'd be like, "Oh no, like my kid, they're not gonna be, they're gonna go off on this wild thing," or like, "Mom, I'm going to go to Woodstock." It's like, "Oh no, don't do that." So, so the satyrs, but I felt like with satyrs that some of them are that way. Some of them are just like, let's just party all the time and have bacchanals and drink wine and have a good time. But then there's other satyrs that are more evolved, and there's this thing called the revel. And the revels are kind of misunderstood. So that the sort of the basic form of the revel is like just having a good time, but then the sort of the art form of the revel is that the revel is about appreciating life. It's about really taking in what the moment has to offer and being present and being tasting the fruit of the grapevine and not worrying about time, being free of time. And so if you get in with the right satyrs, the ones that are wise, the ones that really know what the revel is all about, you're going to get this sort of another another aspect of sort of divine inspiration that comes through, like the pure form of what it means to live in what the pure form of chaos is. That you have let go of structure, that you are just merely moving in a truly natural way. Like a lot of satyrs in magic are red green, which means that they're chaos, but they're also natural. and that the pure form of that is to move with nature, to enjoy the chaotic form, to be okay with that there is no sort of structure or there's no certainty, that you're just kind of allowing nature to move you, but you're also appreciating it as you go. So I really love this thing about satyrs, that if I'm going to play a satyr, I can play the spectrum of, goofball, comedy relief character, to sort of this wise, sage, druidic kind of character. So there's a lot of space in which a player could run a satyr and sort of enjoy all these different aspects of them.
That's very cool. Tell me a little bit more in depth about the Leonin. Now we've got 2 cat races.
Oh yeah, yeah. Leonin are, a much more burly, tough. They're warriors, and they come from they're originally, their whole race was sort of like enslaved by these creatures. In fact, most of the races of Theros were enslaved by these creatures called archons, and they existed long, long ago. And they were tyrants. They just completely dominated everything. And through intervention by the gods like Afara and Erois, the Leonin were inspired, and the humans and Tritons and everybody who was sort of imprisoned by these archons were inspired to rise up, defeat these evil entities, destroy their empire, and then build their own cities. And the humans did it, and out of that came Meletus, the polis of Meletus, and Agnomachos, who was one of the big Archon tyrants. His empire was destroyed, and he had to flee, and all the Archons beat it. The Leonin, they felt like, it's all bad. Anything that is going to try to impose their value system on us, we're not into it. So instead of joining with the humans to build the polis of Meletus, they bugged out, and they said, we're going to create our own place, our own sort of polis, our own city. And it's not necessarily like a polis like Meletus is. It's their own just sort of realm. And we're going to rule ourselves, and we're going to be apart from the gods. We're not going to join in on this sort of belief system thing. We're going to just rule ourselves and be our own people.
What are some other elements of the book that you designed, or that are a favorite bit?
Well, I mean, a lot of the stories about the the satyrs, the Minotaurs, and coming up with them, giving them, Minotaurs were an interesting one, because when we had done Theros, the first one, Minotaurs were like super bad guys. And then it kind of evolved. Like when the second Theros came out for Magic, it was then that now Minotaurs are actually sort of this race of people, and they have a city, and they have a place to be. And now with the D&D book came out, now it's a playable race, and you can actually be a Minotaur. So it was like how to evolve them from what they were back then to now, and thinking about, well, okay, how do I write these creatures, and now they have personalities, and now they have wants and dreams, and they're trying to integrate into societies that, and so now they become like your stalwart companions. And that the Minotaurs that follow Mogus are the giant murder machines that are the old school Theros monsters. But now these other Minotaurs that are like, they're questioning, like, okay, well, now who am I, and who am I in relationship to the gods, and who am I as a hero? Can I leave the weave of my own fate? My fate is kind of an arc, but I want to be something better. I want to be something different. So then to build that into sort of the playable race.
Oh yeah, tell me about the new background.
The new background is the athlete. Yeah. The athlete feeling, again, very kind of inspired by Greece. The idea of somebody who might be a wrestler or a marathon runner. In world, there's a thing called the Eroan Games, which is basically a nod to kind of the Olympic Games. And so you might be somebody who competes in that. And so it felt very flavorful for a Greek-inspired setting to have.
Did you do much design on the sub races as well? I'm
we
pretty
did.
excited to have satyrs.
Yeah, Adam Lee worked on the satyrs, and I think they're my favorite. That's there are so many options that kind of fall out of that. I got to work on Leonin, and what else did I work on now? It's all such a blur.
I
Um,
know it was kind of like a long time ago. What's unique about the satyrs in this?
the satyrs are all about in living for the moment and really indulging in that sense of having a good time is always a worthwhile endeavor. And so, yeah, Adam really designed that into the satyr, and yeah, I think that they're the most fun. I kind of want to see a party of all satyrs and just the mayhem that can ensue.
Oh, the Leonin also, I've been told, have kind of like a disconnect with the gods. They're actually quite angry with the gods. Typically, culturally, they are.
Yeah, generally speaking, uh, they have turned away from the gods. I mean, again, this is all generally. So if you want to play a lean in that, I mean, those that do continue to worship generally lean toward Nylea, who's kind of this god of nature, or Heliod, the god of the sun. But generally speaking, they lean toward being not atheists, because you can't be an atheist in Theros because the gods are present. You don't deny that they exist, but you could be anti-theist, I guess, is kind of a thing that they.
Philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. You can have beef with the gods.
Right, you can believe that they exist and still believe they're not worthy of worship, right? So I think if you want to play that as a thing like that, that is very much within reason for Leonin. It's very easy to get to a character that way, and I think it's a fun story in Theros, especially if you're in a party of people who do worship and are devoted to their gods, and now you have a Leonin. I think that type of a character can create some of the most memorable conversations at a table about philosophy and theology, and I just think it's a fun dynamic to include in the book.
Purchase your copy of Mythic Odysseys of Theros today on D&D Beyond. Link in the description.